Hello and welcome to Grillin' and Chillin' with Coleman. And unless the real Coleman has been put in their witness protection program again, I'm Coleman. Now stay tuned, we're going to be grilling up one of my favorite cuts of meat, the Wagyu Tri Tip. And we're going to be grilling it on my Weber Kettle. Welcome back to the GNC Kitchen. Recently, I put a survey on my Facebook page, and the majority of folks wanted to learn more about grilling the infamous tri-tip. The tri-tip has been one of my favorite cuts of meat, and it's always a staple at our deck parties. The tri-tip comes from the lower part of the sirloin on the cow, and it's known for having really great marbling. And as you know, marbling means flavor. But we're going to take the taste of this to extreme by dry brining this beautiful Wagyu tri-tip. I picked this cut up from Bluebonnet Meat Company here in North Texas, and they did a beautiful job trimming it. Now they usually weigh in at about 2 to 4 pounds before you trim them, and in some cases they still have a fat cap on one end. But as you can see, all the excess fat has been removed to expose the intense marbling that Wagyu is famous for. The tri-tip gets its name from its triangular shape and its 3 distinct points. It became popular on the West Coast and has now become popular in just about every region. The tri-tip has so much internal marbling, and because this is not a long cook, the fat cap does not have enough time to render down. So I usually remove it if it has one, along with any other external fat. It's also important to remove any silver skin left on by your butcher. That stuff is not fun to chew on. Now before we do anything else with this tri-tip, we want to take time to study the grain of the meat. It's important to find the grain now before we add any rub. This will make slicing it across the grain later much easier. You'll notice that the grain runs this way on this end of the tri-tip, but then it switches and starts running this way. So my plan is when I'm done cooking it, I'm going to cut it in half, slice it across the grain this way, and then across the grain this way. The tri-tip has a really great beef flavor, and we can help intensify that by doing a dry salt brine. We do that by rubbing kosher salt to the outside and placing it uncovered back into the refrigerator for 24 hours. I'm also going to flip it halfway through to expose the other side to the air. Now the dry brining is going to help draw out some of the moisture and intensify that beef flavor inside. A good rule of thumb is to use 1.5 tablespoons of salt per pound of meat. So since we're working with a 2-pound tri-tip, I'll be using 3 tablespoons of kosher salt. We're going to sprinkle it to the outside and rub it in. I'm now going to place it in the refrigerator for 24 hours, flipping it over after 12 hours. While we wait, let's go ahead and put together our rub. Now because of the salt that we used in our dry brine, we won't be using any salt in our rub. If you're using a commercial rub and you plan on dry brining, make sure it doesn't contain any salt. In our rub today, we'll be using 2 tablespoons of fresh cracked black pepper, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of my GNC Chipotle powder. This was made fresh this week from jalapenos from my garden. I'm going to be putting out a video soon on how to make this stuff at home. If you're using a commercial Chipotle powder, again, make sure it doesn't contain any salt. Now if you don't like it to have a little bit of a bite, you can eliminate the Chipotle powder. We're going to mix all this up in our shaker and save it for later. Our tri-tip has been brining for 24 hours, so let's take it out and let it start coming up to room temperature. It's very important to let it warm up before placing it on the grill. This is a short cook, and letting it warm up for about an hour will give you much better results. You can see that our color has really intensified in our tri-tip. Here's a before and after shot. What the salt does is it pulls the moisture out of the meat. But if you'll notice, there's no blood or anything on the cutting board. It pulls the moisture out, dissolves the salt, and then reabsorbs back into the meat. That helps to infuse the meat with flavor all the way to the center. Now, while it's coming up to room temperature, let's go ahead and use that rub that we made and put a nice coating on our tri-tip. Because we dry brined it, the surface can tend to be a little dry. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a little olive oil. Pour a little on, and then we're going to rub it on. And all this is going to be used for is a binding agent. Let's make sure we get both sides. Man, that marbling is just gorgeous. Make sure when you add your seasoning, you get a nice coating on all sides. We really don't want to overdo the seasoning here. We don't want to overpower the flavor, the beef flavor of the meat. Always make sure you get both sides. And then we're going to use the excess on the board to get the edges. Now this seasoning is going to give us a nice crust on our tri-tip. Man, that is just a gorgeous piece of meat. Today we're going to be grilling our tri-tip on our Weber Kettle, but we're going to need to set it up for 2-zone cooking. To do that, I'm going to be using my Vortex, and I'm going to put a link below to the one that I use. If you don't have one, you can always bank all your coals on one side. That'll give you a hot zone that we're going to use later and a cooler zone that we're going to use now. The best way to start your coals is with a charcoal chimney. I have filled up my chimney with lump charcoal. I will use some butcher paper in the bottom to start it. It's important that you never use lighter fluid in your grill, including charcoal that's been infused with lighter fluid. Lighter fluid does make lighting your grill much easier, but it's going to add some nasty flavors to your meat. Now that our charcoal is ready, let's pour it in the Vortex that we placed in one side of the grill. Again, if you don't have a Vortex, just push them all to one side. I am adding some hickory chunks to the coals for smoking, but mesquite or oak will work just as well. We're not going to get a lot of smoke flavor in the meat because of the short cook, but we will get some. We will be smoking our tri-tip at a grill temperature of 250 degrees. To do this, we need to close our bottom vents to where they're only open about 1/3, and our top vents to only about half open. Now that our meat has come up to room temperature and our grill is at 250 degrees, let's go ahead and get it on the grill. Today we're going to be grilling our Wagyu Tri Tip to an internal temperature of 125 degrees. We need to make sure we place our meat on the indirect side of our grill, away from our hot coals. I am using my CyberQ Cloud to monitor the grill and the meat temperature during the cook. Insert the probe to the center of the thickest part of the tri-tip. When you put the lid back on your Weber, make sure the top vents are over the meat. This will draw the smoke and heat over the meat and out the top vent. This step should take about an hour depending on your grill and the size of your tri-tip. If you don't have a temperature monitor, check it with your meat thermometer after 30 minutes and then again every 10 minutes until it reaches 125 degrees. So we'll check back with you when we hit that mark. As you can see, our tri-tip has reached an internal temperature of 125 degrees. It's time to take it off the grill for its first rest. You can see that we have a great color and the start of a wonderful crust. We will finalize this crust when we sear it. Now while it's resting, we're going to wrap it loosely in foil. This will help it retain its moisture and maintain its internal temperature. Now we need to get our grill flaming hot. It needs to be up to at least 500 degrees. Remember to remove any temperature probes that you put in, as they can be damaged during these high heats. We will also be placing a grilling skillet on the hot side of the grill to let it get hot. Now I'm going to spray the skillet first with some oil so the tri-tip doesn't stick. Now that our grill is up to 500 degrees and our skillet is hot, it's time to sear the outside of our tri-tip. We're going to sear our tri-tip for 3 minutes on each side. I like to press it down into the grill to help intensify those grill marks. After 3 minutes, flip it over to the other side and press it down. Make sure you're using your glove for this part. After 3 minutes, move the meat back to the cooler side of the grill and check the internal temperature. We are shooting for an internal temperature of 135 degrees. This will give us a tri-tip that is cooked to a perfect medium rare to medium, which is perfect for tri-tip. If you are below 135 degrees, leave it on the indirect side of the grill with the lid closed until you reach it. We now need to let our tri-tip rest for about 30 minutes, but before we do, we need to wrap it up. Now I prefer to wrap mine in aluminum foil, but you can use butcher paper if you prefer. Wrapping and resting it allows the meat juices to redistribute throughout the tri-tip. Now please don't try to skip this step, as it is just as important as all the rest. Okay, we've waited long enough. Let's open this thing up. Wow, the color and the crust came out perfectly. Now before we cut into this tri-tip, let's review what we did. First, we trimmed and dry brined our Wagyu tri-tip. Then we let it sit in the refrigerator for 24 hours and let that salt work its magic. Next, we took it out and let it come up to room temperature while we brought our grill up to 250 degrees. Once we were there, we grilled our tri-tip over indirect heat until it hit an internal temperature of 125 degrees. Next, we took it off and raised the temperature on our grill to over 500 degrees. It then went back on the grill over the direct heat to sear in those juices and give us a great crust. Once it hit an internal temperature of 135 degrees, it came off for a 30-minute rest. Now, if you recall, our meat grain ran this way on this end and this way on this half. So we're going to start off by cutting it in half. This is amazingly tender and moist. It came out a perfect medium rare. You know, I think this piece right here has my name on it. Just so tender. Holy crap. Wow. That is amazing. I gotta tell you, I've grilled a lot of tri-tip in my life, and I have to say that this has got to be my best. I really wish you could taste this. The beef flavor is even more intense with that dry brining. I cannot encourage you enough. Go pick up a Wagyu tri-tip. Follow the steps that I've shared with you, and you'll be able to experience the best tri-tip that you've ever tasted. I want to thank you again for spending time with me in the GNC kitchen as I grilled my Wagyu tri-tip. If you have any questions about this video or any of my other ones, please post a comment below. And speaking of my other videos, if you enjoyed this one, please check out some of my others on my channel. I've got several more in the works, and I'd love to hear in the comments what you'd like to see next. So please like, subscribe, and click that notification bell. It'll let you know when I've got a new video that comes out. And hey, y'all go grill something.